Oh my gosh, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. And a hand for your club founders. They're good. And a hand for yourself for coming out. And just keep clapping for whatever you feel like clapping for. This is good stuff today. So a lot of different things here. I am Mike McClenahan. I am a veterinarian. Hold your applause. It's fine. No, you can't clap after. That's too late. It doesn't work. I've been a veterinarian for 20 years, and I like talking to groups like this. And this is a very diverse group. Like, it's usually like, oh, I'm looking at the pre-vet club or the pre-med club. But there's like, what was your major? Neuroscience. Neuroscience. We have pre-vet. What else we've got going on here? What's your major up there? Yep, you. RVT. This is like the only one around. For like 1 billion miles, this is the only place where RVTs get to learn how to be RVTs. So it's like the best one, right? Pretty much. What else? Do we have any biology majors? Anyone right there? Biology? So, biology in the back? Yeah, good. Microbiology? Anybody like super into microbiology? Anybody at all that really is super into one in the back. Okay, good. So having a very diverse group, I really like that. And I'm going to try to keep this as kind of superficial as possible. But if you have any questions about stuff, just raise your hand and I'll ignore you. But we will then dive into it a little bit deeper. So feel free to bring things up. So I'm going to talk a little bit about myself first, because that is my favorite topic. And then we're going to talk about zoonotic disease. And yeah, that's the right way to say it. It's not zoonotic disease. How many O's? There's 2. It can't be zoonotic disease. So you can say it however you want, though. Let's see if this works. Nope. Was it this way? Technical difficulties. It worked a second ago. Do I have to hit this one? That should. Nope. Whoop. Nope. Wait. Yeah. Round of applause for pushing a lot of buttons. All right, so I did go to Iowa State University. Go Cyclones. A couple. All right, yeah. It's all of us. I grew up in Iowa, and I was one of those kids that always wanted to be. Is this not working? It's not going. Let's see if I can just figure it out. Oh, nope, too much. Okay. Always wanted to be a veterinarian. Notice the cat shirt on that little boy. So I had those shirts all the time. These are my 2 kittens now. Olive is the thinner one, and the one that's a little bit like there's more cat there than there should be. That one is Pazuki, because she's a crazy little Pazuki. But I grew up in Iowa, and I did 3 years of undergrad at Iowa State in animal science and zoology. And yep, zoology once again. You can say it either way you want. If you want to say zoology, I'm not going to get mad at you. You can just be wrong. So I did 3 years, and then I got into vet school after only 3 years. And I know what you're thinking. You must be really smart if you got in after 3 years. And yes, I am. We're going to see if this is working. Good. Oh, it's working. Okay, so then I've done about 20 years of private practice. I know, I don't look it. It's fine. And I did a little stint in there for as a technical services veterinarian for Bayer Animal Health. And I was in Southeast United States and the Caribbean, going around talking about their products, tick prevention, flea prevention, microbiology, all sorts of things. It was a great time to go to a bunch of different vet schools. And while I was doing that, I actually became an instructor at the Institute for Healthcare Communications, which was a week-long intensive training course and then teaching classes beyond that for about 3 years in healthcare communications. And probably more important to you all, I am also the Bowtie Vet guy on YouTube. Thank you. Also on Instagram. And television. Television, for those of you young ones, it's like YouTube, except somebody else decides. You just sit there and stuff comes on, and you just have to know when it's on. And that's how it works. At least that's how it was when I was. Gonna go? Okay. So there's a little bit about me. Again, from the time I was very young, everybody would ask me, what do you want to be? Everybody else was like, I want to be a football player. I want to be a fireman. And I want to be a veterinarian. I had this really high voice. And you can see me with my cat up in the corner there. That was Charlie. And yeah, I did a little dancing now and then. So a little bit of a dancing machine. But that is, now what I'm doing is private practice and doing a lot of videos on YouTube, trying to get education, trying to really get a message out there. So anybody else heard of YouTube? No, just me? Okay. There we go. Do we have any cat lovers? You could yell, you can say, yeah. Dog lovers? Wow. I'm actually a vegetarian, but whatever. It's gross. Everybody's like, oh no, he didn't make that joke. Okay, so what is a zoonotic disease? It's a disease that can be spread from animals to people. Sometimes you'll look at that and they'll say it can go both directions. Some people use the ones that can go from people to animals as reverse zoonosis. Doesn't really matter. Basically, we're talking about diseases that pass between animals, vertebrates, and humans, and why they're important. So we're going to talk about what kinds of diseases there could be and how they're transmitted. And before that, we really want to talk about who cares about this, right? So, big deal, right? Like we don't get much rabies here or anything like that. But if you look at the WHO and you look at their One Health initiative, it says about 75%, two-thirds, three-quarters, of all emerging diseases are zoonotic diseases, right? There's no test on this, so you don't have to take notes, but you can if you want. And 61% of all diseases started as zoonotic diseases. Millions of people die from zoonotic diseases every year, right? And it's food safety. But there is probably one thing even more important than all of these. Anybody want to take a guess what it is? Any guesses? No? Zombies. That's right, zombies. If there is going to be a zombie apocalypse, it is going to be a zoonotic disease. I guarantee it. And why do we care about it? Why do the people in this room care about it? We're the first line of defense people. We're the ones that are protecting humanity from this. Who is my ex-girlfriend? I just am really happy that I got to use this picture at some point. We're also the most likely to survive. Veterinarians, really good at not getting bit. Treating more than one species, yeah, that's us, absolutely. Even new species, an aggressive species. And who's going to help us with a cure? The microbiologists, probably. They're going to be figuring out what's causing this and how to defeat it. So as we're going through this, I want you all to think about the zombie apocalypse and what your role might be. As vet techs, you're the ones going to have to hold that while I try to hold it. I'll be like, there's two rules. When I talk to the veterinary technicians, I say the rules are, A, do not let me get bit. Rule number 2, do not forget rule number 1. Rule number 3, you do not get bit. And rule number 4, if rules 1 and 2 are in doubt, disregard rule number 3. I'm kidding, of course. We don't want anybody to get bit. Do we get bit ever? Rarely. But why? Because we're good at it. We know what we're doing. Okay. So let's talk about some of these diseases. Are we going? Once in a while? I know you just want to look at this picture. Why is it not? Sometimes it's working. Oh, no. Oh. Don't touch anything because then it works all of a sudden. So types of diseases. I left one off of here, but we're going to go through each one of these a little bit individually, and we'll talk about an example of each one. The one I left off here, does anybody know? Anybody know what's not on here that might be considered a zoonotic disease? Maybe? What? I heard somebody whispering something like, I eat my twin in the womb. What? Begins with a P. Starts with a P. Protozoa would probably be under parasitic. That's a great guess. 5 points to Gryffindor. Prions, or prions, depending on which side of the pond you're from. Anybody heard of those? Little pieces of protein. They get in there and cause, what does that cause? Mad cow disease, yeah. Scrapie in sheep. Wasting disease in deer that's going on right now. They call it the zombie deer disease. So that one's not on there because there's not tons we're going to talk about with that one. So we're going to kind of stick more to these here. So bacterial, does anybody know any of the bacterial diseases that might be zoonotic. Anybody mention, like, think of one? A bacterial disease that you could get from an animal. All right, we'll give some help. Maybe. Anybody? Here are a couple for you. So Lyme disease, again, not Lyme's disease. Lyme, it's named for Lyme, Connecticut. Lyme disease, this picture actually is, does anybody know what this picture is? It's one of the ones up there. I know somebody does. This is anthrax. And it's the little chain-looking, sort of square-looking things that are making, rectangular things that are making chains. Those are Bacillus anthracis. So anthrax, not just an awesome band. Leptospirosis and Bartonellosis. Anybody know what that is? That one. We'll go to that one in a second. So bacterial diseases, there's a whole bunch of them, and usually these will be held in different kinds of animals. So Lyme disease, what's the other animal that we can get it from? It's through a tick, absolutely. Is there a vertebrate that gets it? Do you know? Deer, yeah. Deer can be one of those. Anthrax can be in cattle. Leptospirosis in a bunch of different animals. Leptospirosis is actually one we can see in our dogs and cats. It can cause kidney and liver failure. I actually had leptospirosis once. And then that last one, this is a little from the CDC, obviously, about Bartonellosis. Bartonellosis is also known as cat scratch disease. Cat scratch fever. No, remember that one? So this one is one that they used to say was from the cats directly, but actually it's going through the fleas and the flea dirt. And they were finding that the flea dirt contained the bacteria in there, and then when somebody got scratched from them or would pet them and had an open wound, they would become infected with it. And it sounds kind of cool or kind of funny, like, no big deal. There's a whole bunch of really cool named bacterial ones, like Rocky Mountain Spotted Fever, right? That's a cool sounding name. If you're gonna have a disease, you might as well have Rocky Mountain Spotted Fever. It sounds pretty cool. And people think of cat scratch disease, a lot of jokes about it, but it's a pretty serious disease when you get down to it. And especially if there's a young child. They'll get these really bad problems in their lymph nodes. The lymph nodes get swollen. This is an armpit. You can see a little nipple right at the bottom there of a child. And I had a friend that worked with me at Bayer Animal Health, and she had a child who was 1 year old and got cat scratch disease. And that child was in the hospital for about 3 weeks with this disease. So this is a really important disease. And how, then, as we are thinking about our role in all this, could we help prevent this disease? Well, again, this goes to mode of transmission, right? So how did I say it went through? Fleas, exactly right. Yep, Ravenclaw, 10 points. So fleas. So if we're a veterinarian or a vet tech, talking about flea prevention is really important. It can make a big difference in people's lives. So let's try to remember that one. People think of it as just kind of a funny thing, but man, that kid was sick. Did make it though. It's warm in this room. Okay, viral diseases. Here's a couple of them. I heard somebody earlier say rabies. Right? So rabies is one that most people here have heard of or have seen Old Yeller. Yep, it's a pretty bad one. And all of those of us who have pets have had our pets vaccinated against rabies. Anybody know how many, approximately, how many people contract rabies in the US every year? Yeah, about 2, 3, not very many, very, very few. Occasionally, somebody will live through getting rabies as well. We have really good vaccination protocols. We have really good public health in the United States. Worldwide, any guesses to how many people die of rabies every year? Want to take a guess? I heard the correct answer down here.
50,000.
As many as 50,000. Yeah, sometimes it's more, sometimes less. Think of 50,000 people die of rabies every year. And in the US, just 3. Why? Because we're good at what we do, right? Everybody has a job in this, and this is where vaccination has made a huge difference in people's lives. So then we have emerging diseases which are coming up, things you'll hear about a lot that we don't have as much. Avian influenza, and actually influenza in general is an important one. Is there a dog flu? Anybody know? There is a dog flu. We don't see too much of it here in California. It's definitely more in the East Coast at this point, but it's coming over, and there is a vaccine. There are two versions of it that are coming around. And how about humans? Can humans give flu to pets? What do you think about that? Yes? No? How many say yes? Raise your hand, clap, anything? Couple of hands raised up, maybe. I don't know. I don't really want to commit because people might see it, but I'm going to raise my hand. How about, what did I say? No, yes, no? I don't remember what I said. Give me the yeses. Give me the no's. They're both correct. So pretty much that is something that it very, very rarely happens. There have been about 3 instances of confirmed cases where human influenza, like an H1N1, has transmitted to, say, a cat, and the cats died from it. So it's pretty bad disease in cats when they get it. Anytime one thing that happens a lot of times with these zoonotic diseases is when they come from, say, an avian flu, and then it mutates and it becomes more virulent, and it's something people can catch, sometimes it burns itself out really fast because people die from it right away, right? A case in point for that was Ebola. When it first came out, it was something that, although it was very contagious, people got really sick and died from it right away. Now we've been seeing it spread a little bit more, and they'll have these outbreaks that kind of spread a little bit more. And we had even some cases here in the US that traveled from Africa. And that causes a very bad hemorrhagic disease and death pretty quickly. And again, some of these are very easy to transmit, and some are harder to transmit. So of these, what do you think is the easiest one to transmit? Yep. Yep. How about rabies? How does that get transmitted? Does anybody know? So saliva, bites, right? So bites, it has to break the skin, that sort of thing. So direct contact. How about Ebola? Contact of body fluids, yeah, so that's that one. What about influenza and just flu in general? Airborne, right? So which of those would be the easiest to transmit? Airborne, exactly, right. So again, if you happen to be a biochemist, you might be thinking about, what are ways we can protect surfaces, we can protect people against the transmission of the disease at the beginning. Remember, first line of defense. Right? So that's where your chemistry is going to come in. So it's viral diseases. Excellent. We're going to have lots of time to talk about these things. Any questions so far? I should stop and see. Yeah?
Have you heard, I'm sure you've heard, but they say that like really deadly viruses tend to have a shorter lifespan than like something that's not as deadly. Like for example, Ebola, like if it was like on the countertop, it has a tendency to die off a lot quicker than if it was like.
So how hardy are they in the environment? And this goes for bacteria and kind of basically everything. The more hardy they are in the environment, the more dangerous they're going to be, right? So some of the things can last a long time, some not very long at all. So HIV, how long does it last in the environment? Long time or short time? Short time, yeah. I mean, it dies off pretty quickly. So I'm old enough to remember, when this was a thing in the 80s, and it was really scary because we didn't know any of that information. Can it live in the environment? If somebody has HIV and they touch something and you go and touch it, is that a problem or not? We didn't know for a really long time. It was super scary. And so again, life sciences, this is where we come back to our basic science, learning about how hardy these things are. So some of the viruses can stick around for a while and some of them can't. It just it varies widely. And the same with bacteria. So bacteria, when we're looking at those, who's had microbiology so far? Who's taken a microbiology class? What kinds of things in a bacteria are going to determine whether or not it can live in the environment? Do you know? Surface proteins, perhaps. Yeah, different proteins that are on the outside. So we won't get too in depth with that. Okay, so I'll bet there's somebody in the room that could give a really long, in-depth lecture about exactly that sort of thing on the surface proteins. But we won't do that today. We won't make somebody get into it. But that's a great question. And so something to think about, again, when you're thinking about the zombie apocalypse, which of these things are going to cause that? HIV? Probably not. So any sort of those retroviruses, feline immunodeficiency virus, again, not very hardy in the environment. So it's a great question. Cool. Any other questions about this? So we're slowing down. At the end, we're going to have a big, long Q&A. So you're going to be able to ask all sorts of questions about my life, things like this. So viral, what was the next thing we were talking about? Anybody remember? Fungal. Anybody know any fungal infections? Ringworm. So there's your one little sort of gross picture about ringworm. So there are some really gross fungal infections that they can get. Ringworm, a lot of people like to think of it as a worm. Hey, my dog has worms, it has ringworm. Nope, it doesn't have ringworm. How contagious is ringworm? Very? Not very? Yeah, it depends on what kind it is. Ringworm is not one kind of fungus. So there's several different kinds that can cause this. When I was in school, a little story here, the class ahead of me, there was a cow that came through that had a very, very contagious kind of ringworm. And we did not know it for about a week and a half until everybody in that class that was in the clinics at the time started getting rashes on their faces. And right here and right here. And the reason was, at the time, we just had phones that everybody had to use the same phones throughout the whole hospital. Every phone got contaminated. Every person that was making a call from anywhere in the clinic got ringworm. So it was the year ahead of me. So after that, anytime we were in the clinics, we would all take little wet wipes and wipe the phone down every single time we used it, because it can be really, really virulent. One of my really good friends, his first job out of vet school, he was in Alaska. And one of the things that he had to do, he'd grown up on a pig farm in Minnesota. And so he was up in Alaska, and they said, oh, we're going to have the county fair. We're going to have petting zoo. Somebody needs to evaluate these animals and make sure they're safe for the petting zoo and for the general public to see it. And he walks in there, and he looks at it and was like, all these pigs have ringworm. He's backing out. He's like, nope, you can't do it. So he shut down all of this, and this was like the day before it was going to happen, and people were freaking out because they were like, they'd planned for this, county fair for like a year, and it's like shut down because of him. And he's like 2 weeks out of vet school, and they keep trying to tell him, like, it's not that bad, and he's like, I can't do it, man. I can't say that there's not ringworm here. And the paper then says, local vet destroys kids' dreams of seeing a pig. Not local vet saves kids from rash all over their whole body, but destroys oh man. And so a couple of these others. So cryptococcosis, we do see that in cats once in a while. And the other one that's there, that's really long and hard to say. Does anybody know what that one is? Coccidioidomycosis. Valley fever. Again, a lot of the thing about fungal diseases is that they are ubiquitous in the environment, right? So people that are gardening can pick up a fungus from there. It's not always from animals, but animals can be a carrier, and yes, we can give it back to them. When I was right out of school, my brother called me and said, what do I do? My dog has ringworm. And I said, oh, really? What did you see on it? He said, nothing, but the doctor says I have ringworm. And I must have got it from the dog. And I said, well, that's interesting, no lesions on your dog. I happen to know that my brother is a wrestling coach. And I said, and his wife was a dancer. And I said, so does anybody on your wrestling team have ringworm? No, nobody. I said, okay. What about anybody in the dance troupe? Oh, yeah, there was one guy that had it there, but they said he didn't get it from him. And I'm like, what do you mean you didn't get it from him? Of course that's where you got it. The dogs don't have any lesions. So again, thinking about where these could be coming from, it's not just animals to people. It could be people to people as well. So some of them will go all over the place. This last one just kind of came up. I just learned about this one. Candida auris is a really interesting and kind of a scary thing that's come out lately. It is a fungal disease that is resistant to almost all of the antifungal drugs we have. Luckily, it's not something that most people that are healthy are going to get, but occasionally in a few cases there have been hospitalized patients that have weakened immune systems and have gotten this fungus, and it gets in their lungs, and it gets, kind of in there. It can get into their retinas. It can get all over their whole body. Several people have died from it. And then when they went to look at the rooms where these people were in, they found spores of this fungus in the ceiling tiles. They found it on basically every surface in the room was contaminated with this. So these fungus will send spores out into there. And so that's a really scary one because nothing is killing this one. Luckily, we have immune systems, and our immune systems are pretty good at getting rid of most of this stuff. So, so far this one isn't causing a problem, but it's sort of something to keep your eye on. And again, when we're thinking about our own jobs and our own responsibilities as we're going through, how are we going to combat something like this? What are we going to do if we get a case like this? In veterinary medicine, we'll see dogs and cats that come in with nosebleeds. You just be bleeding all over the place. And one of the things they can get are fungal infections up in the nose. How are we going to get rid of that if we can't get drugs to there? It's really a tough thing. In some cases, they'll actually drill a hole into the nasal cavity and flush the drugs through there. And that's the only way to get rid of it. It can be really serious. And it can take weeks and weeks and weeks to get rid of it. So again, while fungal infections may be not quite as virulent as some of the viruses and some of the bacteria, they can be devastating because they're so hard to get rid of. Cool. So who likes fungus? Cool, right? That's a pretty good one. So we've seen a couple things here. Viral, bacterial, fungal. Anybody having any leaders for what they think might be the zombie apocalypse one? Any formulating some theories on which one is going to bring us down as a species? Keep thinking about it, because there's a right answer, and I will give it to you later. Last one, parasitic. Anybody know any parasitic diseases that we can catch? Tapeworms. Tapeworm's a cool one. Somebody loves tapeworms. Why do you love tapeworms so much?
No, I just guessed it and I was right, so I was like...
Yay, got one right. 10 points for Ravenclaw and 1 for Hufflepuff. Slytherin. Okay, all right. Somebody got to be. Okay, so yeah, does anybody know which one of those is a tapeworm? I'm going to guess. Well, it's not the roundworm, and it's not the hookworm. Echinococcus. Echinococcus causes hydatid disease. The radiograph that's up here, and yeah, that's a radiograph, not an X-ray, by the way, right? X-rays are the rays that actually take, and this is the radiograph. So, but if you say that to somebody who doesn't know, they're going to be like, what do you mean radiograph? So I say X-rays when I'm talking to clients. I'll say, oh yeah, we looked at the radiographs. I mean the X-rays. Oh, okay, I know what you're talking about. Now that you're saying the correct word, then I know what you're talking about. And so we'll do a little radiology 101 here. So bones are white and air is, there you go. Bones are white, air is black. Everything in between is in between. So if this is a person we're looking at it, the lungs are mostly what? Air. And so they should be black. Do you see all the little white patches in there? Anybody want to take a guess what those are? Those are big sacs, about yay big, full of tapeworm eggs. Yeah, right? It's pretty gross. Okay, this is called hydatid disease. And this is a term that is found in sheep, cattle occasionally, and people can get this one. It's extremely dangerous. We don't have it here much. It is a reportable disease, so if you ever see this and you're working somewhere, it needs to be reported. Mostly in the U.S., it's going to be in the central U.S., up into Canada. This is something that Adriana may know. Once in a while, we'll have an animal that's traveling to the U.K., and before they leave, within about 48 hours, they have to be treated for tapeworms, and this is why. They don't want these tapeworms coming into the UK. They don't have it now. You can imagine it would be devastating if they found it in their sheep population there. They would have to cull all the sheep, get rid of them. And this is something that if they're doing a surgery to remove one of these egg sacs and it breaks open, it can cause a severe anaphylactic reaction as well in humans. So very serious disease. You can imagine it probably is a little bit hard to breathe with a big sack of tapeworm eggs in your lungs, right? So that's how that one is. Oh, I did. I put the life cycle up there. Sheep, dogs, that sort of thing. So roundworms. Roundworms spread through, anybody know? What's that? Ingesting, say that? Through fecal oral. So through the digestive tract, right? So if you touch touch your dog and it's got some eggs on it, and you have that, and you're like, oh, I got some hair in my mouth. Now you've just ingested it, right? Most of the time, the ones that dogs get and the one that people get, not going to be a problem. But every once in a while, we'll see things that have what we call an aberrant migration. That means these worms they get into a body and they're like, so it's a dog, roundworm, and it's like, yeah, here I am in the intestines, and I'm supposed to go thing, and it doesn't know where it's go because it's not in a dog, and it gets completely lost, and it can end up in the brain. It can end up in the eye. Somewhere several hundred kids a year in the U.S. do get blindness from roundworms that go into the eye. It used to be much worse than it is now, but it's a very, very serious thing. Again, we're kind of lucky because we're in California. California, it's not as warm and moist as it is, say, in the southeast United States. So the incidence of these diseases is much lower than it is. Hookworms, how do they go into the body? They go in right through the skin. So you'd be walking on, this is one of the reasons dogs aren't allowed on some beaches. You walk in barefoot, the eggs go in and they'll burrow into your skin, called a creeping eruption, which is a great name, right? Creeping eruption, and they cause pretty serious disease in different parts of the world. And there's several different kinds of hookworms that can infect people. And toxoplasmosis, does anybody know what spreads that? What animal? Hey, good, everybody's awake still. And so this is the one you used to hear about, like, oh, if you're a woman and you're pregnant, you cannot touch the cat litter at all. Don't even go anywhere near it. The CDC has changed their stance on that a little bit. They used to be like, if you have a cat, you need to get rid of that cat. And no, you don't have to get rid of the cat. They used to say if you have to change the litter, if you're a woman and you're pregnant, and you have to change the litter to wear a respirator and gloves and all that. And they've actually come away from that a little bit too. The recommendations now are to just wash your hands and to make sure you clean it every day. The other thing you can do is get tested for it to see if you've already been exposed to it, which a lot of us that have cats already have already been exposed to it, so it's not that big a deal. But it can cause some pretty serious problems in humans as well. Okay, parasitic diseases. Any questions about that? How are we liking that for the zombie apocalypse? Maybe, yeah, right? Could be. Anybody ever heard of a roundworm called Balis ascaris? Know what that spread through? Raccoons. So raccoons have a kind of a roundworm called Balis ascaris, and when people get this one, it tends to go to the brain right away. It just loves brains. What does that sound like?
Zombie.
Yeah, I think so. So we need to watch out for that one. Unfortunately, it does usually cause death, so not as bad. So we've talked about the main kinds of zoonotic diseases. Now we're going to talk very briefly about modes of transmission. And so we've kind of been touching on that as we go. But so these two things go hand in glove, and it's really important to think about both of these things as we're thinking about our zombie apocalypse. Yeah?
Are you familiar with the zombie ant one, or the one that takes over insects?
We might even get to that one later. Yeah. Oh, what is it? Do you know what it is?
I don't know.
We'll talk about it later. Yeah, that's cool. Okay. So here are some ways to think about transmission, right? So direct contact, as you can imagine, that's, nice little Yoda dog there. That was at WonderCon a couple of years ago, I believe. That would be direct contact. And it could be through any infected animal or through their body fluids. Airborne. Wait, who is that? Where was that? That was at Comic-Con? That was at Comic-Con. So airborne, we talked about influenza as being an airborne. And of course, the more airborne is much, much easier to transmit than others. But luckily, it's not as many of them. Vector-borne is the next one. What does that mean? Insects or? Not an insect. Arachnid, right? So it's a little bit different. That is a tick, right? So tick-borne diseases or through insects or others. So ticks are kind of a big one, and ticks I think are really interesting. So I'm going to digress slightly on ticks. Anybody know what kind of tick that is? What's that? What kind of tick? Anybody? It's a lone star tick because it's got that lone little star on there. So it's amblyoma is the genus name. So anyway, so tick-borne diseases are kind of an important one because it's something we don't think about as much. Lyme disease is probably the one people have heard about the most. Dogs can be silent carriers of Lyme disease, but there's a whole bunch of other ones that are out there. One of them I mentioned earlier, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, is a really cool one. So it's a rickettsial, which is a kind of a bacteria, and it is spread through ticks. Now there's differing opinions on some of these diseases on how long the ticks have to attach. Sometimes some people think it's as short as 2 hours for some diseases. Sometimes they have to be attached for a good 12 to 24 hours. So it varies from disease to disease and from species to species, so which one they're going through. But this is something that a lot of veterinarians will talk about, like, oh, we need to have tick prevention. Right? The hard thing about tick prevention is ticks don't spend most of their life cycle on dogs or cats or deer. Right? So fleas, in contrast, if we're trying to prevent fleas, we just have to put a preventive on the animal because that's taking care of those adult fleas. Now, certainly the life cycle does involve the environment as well, but a tick, they only jump on, they take their meal, and they jump off, and then they lay their eggs. How many eggs does one tick lay at a time? Anybody want to guess? Up to 8,000, depending on the species. So one tick could produce 8,000 eggs. So if we think about that, and we think about we're preventing disease, right? So let's say you have a tick and it lays 8,000 eggs, right? And then your dog or you go walking through the brush, and then the ticks, the nymphs and the adults, they do this thing when the vibrations and the CO2 come through, they start doing this thing. They go out to the edge of the leaves and stuff, and they do this thing. It's called questing. It's a great term. They're just questing. So they do this sort of thing, and then they grab on, and they work their way up, and they take their meal. Now, if we have a preventive that we're using, and it's, say, 99% effective, right? That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? But if we have 1,000, let's say we only have 1,000 of the nymphs that live. So if something is 99% effective, how many would you see, if it's doing exactly what it says, how many ticks could you find on a dog? 10, right? 99% effective. So 10 out of 1,000. So if you found 10 ticks on your dog, you'd probably be freaking out, right? If you found 10 ticks on you, you might be freaking out. So it's a numbers game. So when we're talking about vector-borne diseases, really it's about numbers. We're just losing the numbers battle there. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. Foodborne. I didn't have any picture of like raw meat or anything, so I just figured an opal here would be a really good one for the foodborne. And so this is, again, as we have more and more people, we have to feed more and more people. So we have a lot of food coming together at once. If any of that food gets contaminated, it contaminates all the food. And we're finding this out because we have these big outbreaks of disease, right? And it can be on lettuce. It doesn't have to be on just meat, but it can be on lettuce. It could be on things, especially anything that we're eating raw. This kind of comes to the raw pet food thing that people always ask me about. And so to me, raw pet food is something that, the risk just doesn't seem to be worth it at this time. It doesn't show that there's a big benefit to feeding your pet raw food. Because if you think about it, if they're eating raw food and they get bacteria, salmonella, some E. coli, and they get it all over their fur, and then they go and they lick you, you get it that way, right? So that's an indirect contact way, but that's something to do. So, we do need to eat. So making sure that we think about food safety, and as you're going forward in your careers, thinking about food safety would be a big one. So if our food or water supply were contaminated with a zombie apocalypse bacteria, let's say, how bad would that be? That'd be pretty bad. Indirect contact, I know that's not indirect contact, it's direct contact, but if somebody kissed me after that, that would be indirect contact. Or you think about a contaminated surface. And again, we kind of touched on that earlier about whether or not a particular pathogen is hardy and stays there in the environment. So okay, so now that's your basic general overview of zoonotic disease. Just really think about modes of transmission and the kinds of pathogens that we're seeing, right? So very, very kind of superficial. Any questions about that, or what kind of things are running through your head? You got the zombie apocalypse thing, everybody know? Everybody have in their head which kind of, anybody have a formulation on which one they think is going to be the winner? What? Anybody want to take a wild guess? How about rabies? So what do we think about rabies as a zombie apocalypse pathogen? What is it? What kind of, is it bacteria? It's a virus. Okay, so it's a virus. Okay, what's its mode of transmission? Saliva, right. So bites and stuff. Ooh, that's sounding pretty good. Bites. Maybe. And where does it affect? The nervous system, so the brain. Ooh, brains and biting sounds pretty good. Is it hardy in the environment? Not very, not very. So that one we'll keep on the list, but maybe. How about this one? What is it? Airborne. Ooh, is that scary? Not scary? Yeah, I think that's a little bit scary too. Yeah, that one could be. But people get, what do you get from influenza? What's the clinical signs? What part of your respiratory? Exactly. So people always say, oh, I've got the stomach flu. There's no stomach flu. It's not stomach flu. Influenza is a respiratory disease. I had it a couple years ago. Oh man, the one year I didn't get my vaccine. Oh man, I was in Las Vegas at a convention, and like the second day there, I like got hit with this fever, and I spent 3 days just in my room sweating and coughing, and it was bad. It was bad news. So get your flu vaccine. But this one again, not real. It's very easy to spread, but again is respiratory, so not really what we're looking for, right? So how about anthrax? Anybody know what that is? We talked about it. What is it? Yep, you said it. Bacteria, yeah. So, and is this one very hardy in the environment or not?
Yes.
Yeah, this one can definitely stay in the environment for a long time. You guys might not remember there was actually a time after 9/11 where there were some white powder was sent and it had some anthrax in it. But this one again, while it's pretty hardy in the environment, probably not going to cause neurologic disorders. So probably not that. And so the last one, you already asked about it. You ready? You get Ravenclaw gets 50 points for this one. If you 10 more points if you can say it. You said it. Let's hear it. Orpheocordyceps unilateralis. So this is that zombie ant disease, and this is you can see it looks like a what? Looks like an ant with like a mushroom coming out of its head, right? So this is one where it actually attacks the central nervous system, causes the ants to climb up really high up in the tree and then latch on to someplace, and then the spores come out, and then it goes poof like this, and it spreads them out far down below. So that one could be, although it's not real easy to spread, and there's some reasons for that. But so anybody have any bets on which one? It's going to cause the zombie apocalypse? Out of those? Or anyone, if anybody has any others, I'd be willing to change my mind. Go for it. I'll give you the microphone. You feel like it's going to be a parasite? For sure? Yeah? Like Alien, where it came out of the thing, it was like, "Bark!" Right? And had the blood that was acid blood. You guys remember that?
It's like
GERD for aliens. Although it's their blood, so it probably isn't so bad. But it ate through. So what acid would eat through metal so fast? Ooh, chemistry question. You didn't know you were going to get a chemistry question in a zoonotic disease lecture. Anybody want to guess? If you had to make a guess? Hydrofluoric, maybe? Hydrofluoric, maybe? That would be my guess. I don't know. Any chemistry majors?
It is
It is that, see?
I dropped it on my laptop and it didn't go right.
It didn't go well for the laptop. Did it really eat through the laptop?
It like,
I'm sorry, I'm really excited about this all of a sudden.
I wiped it off, but it like eroded it.
Like within seconds, it eroded through it, yeah.
You can see it. It's on the under and it's on the top.
Do you still have that laptop? Because I really want to see it. That's pretty cool. Okay. So the whole reason I wanted you to think about these things is I really want you to think about prevention. And so we all have different majors here. We have different emphasis that we're looking at for biomedical science. And I really wanted to bring it back. And while it's kind of tongue-in-cheek and we're making fun a little bit about zombies and stuff, all of this stuff is really important. And we all have different roles in it, right? So food safety, I mean, this is where we're talking about microbiology, veterinary medicine, right? Human medicine, all of those come into it. Hygiene, not just washing your hands, but creating new ways to clean your hands and clean surfaces. All of that becomes really important when we're talking about things like that fungus that contaminated the entire room that the patient was in after he died. Choosing pets wisely. So this one comes into like, recently there was an outbreak of salmonella from people that were snuggling their hedgehogs. Hedgehog snuggling? I don't know if that's really something I'm just trying to picture because there's a lot of needly pointy things on hedgehogs. But they actually, the AVMA put out a bulletin and said, please tell your clients not to snuggle their hedgehogs and kiss them. Reptiles are another one. So if you have anybody, I often ask people if there's anybody in the house who is immunocompromised in any way. And that is a thing that I have to think about a lot. Not everybody knows what the word immunocompromised means. What's another way to ask that? Get sick easy, absolutely. So when you're talking to people who aren't as smart as we are, we're really smart people, then you may have to think about different ways to say it. Another way I ask if there's anybody who's had a transplant, anybody who's on a lot of medications for anything, really old, really young people. Not young like you, like younger. You're fine, you're all good. So. All right, and then of course never working for a mad scientist. Mad science, they don't know they're mad. It all seems very, I'm pretty sure Darth Vader does not think that he's the villain from his point of view, so that's it. Okay, so that's the end. Yeah, right? That's a pretty good picture. What's that? What? So I guess I want to thank everybody for your attention. We did just about the right amount of time, and we're going to have a little Q&A here, a little time for you to ask me any questions about anything. I am an open book, and you can ask me. I mean, I won't answer everything. There's a couple of other projects I'm doing. The Vets Unleashed is a podcast I'm going to be doing with another veterinarian friend of mine, where you talk about all things veterinarian, so keep watching for that. The Companionist, this is my friend right there, Chelsea. She works at a comic book store, and we will be talking about animal companions through time and space. In other words, who's the best animal companion in the comic books? There is a right answer. It's Lion Cat. And again, I'm on the YouTube as well. So, all right, questions. Is that good? Any questions about that stuff before we move on to the Q&A? Because I am going to A your Q's. Yes.
Is it true that animals that have rabies are scared of water?
Is it true that animals that have rabies are scared of water? No. It can cause all sorts of neurologic signs. One thing about rabies that I learned in school and was very useful to me in my last year of veterinary school is they said rabies can look like anything. So rabies can attack different parts of the body and different parts of the central nervous system. So it can cause circling, it can cause drooling, it can cause a lockjaw, it can cause a lot of different things. So when they asked me, in every single case that I had my entire senior year, they said, come up with a differential list. In other words, what things could be causing this? I always said rabies. And they said, rabies couldn't cause blackheads on the thing. I said, they told me rabies could look like anything. And they'd say, all right, they'd write rabies every single time. So that was it. So long answer to your short question there. What else? Yes, a written question. Oh.
For the viral, for the avian influenza,
Yes.
that mainly concerned if you come in contact with wildlife or
Oh,
pets?
Great question. So for avian flu or influenza in general, so there's a lot of different influenzas out there, aren't there? So are we worried about pets or are we worried about wildlife? Most of the ones that we've been seeing lately have been either pets or there's another way it would be if it's not pets and it's not wildlife. What's in between there? Farm animals, right? So if you think about some of these people that are working in where there's, thousands of chickens or turkeys or whatever, and they're, aerosolizing animals that have died. And I mean, it's just kind of how our food is produced when we're trying to produce food for millions and millions of people. It's sort of a byproduct of that. It's probably more through that we're going to end up seeing it jump species. And some of the times it'll jump to one person and they'll get a bird flu, an influenza from but it doesn't transmit to somebody else. And so sometimes it'll be a slight change in the different proteins that are on the outside. And you'll hear those, the H1N1 or H5N3. Anybody know what those mean? They're different surface proteins. Hemagglutinin and neuraminidase, right? N stands for neuraminidase. No, it isn't. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Are you writing a paper? So you got to be, and they're going to put it down. So, cool. What else? Yes.
If you can tell us in your 20 years of private practice, what's the wildest thing you've seen?
The wildest thing I've seen in my 20 years of practice. One time, Adriana had so much to drink. No, I'm kidding. The wildest thing I've seen. Do you mean animal-wise, or just weird things that happen? There's some pretty.
Listen.
Because some people wonder, what's the weirdest animal you've ever taken care of? And, I've taken care of hedgehogs are pretty weird. What else? We have monkeys there now. We have some primates and stuff like that. But then I've seen some strange diseases. Here's a really kind of a sad case, but a case I had recently. They brought it to me for a behavior consult because they said the floor is lava. And I said, what do you mean by that? The cat wanted to be up high on anything. If they put it on the floor, it would jump up high, and it kept jumping up high. And the problem was this cat was very fractious. We had to give it a sedative just to even do an exam on it. We couldn't get near it. It was hissing and trying to bite us, and its name was Coco Loco, of course. Don't ever name your animal something like that, because it will live up to its name. Don't call it Lucky, because it isn't gonna be. Don't call it Demon, because it will be. Right? Just call it Pazuki or Olive. Right? Because I love you, right? So this cat, we finally got it, and we sedated it and looked at everything and that we could, and did an exam and drew some blood and urine, and boy, everything looked pretty normal. We couldn't figure it out. The only thing we didn't do was take X-rays right away, because people were like, let's spend our money on the blood work and the urinalysis. All came back normal. So couldn't figure it out. Started on some medication for anxiety to see if that helped. Pain medicine didn't seem to help at all. A couple weeks later, it came back and its eye was swelling a little bit. And so we sedated it again, took X-rays, and it had tumors in its chest, and it had tumors in its brain that was making it act funny. So it was a very sad, sad case. But we'll get cases like that are very unusual. People will come in and say the strangest things. They came in and said, yeah, the floor is lava, and I had to figure out what it was. So it was a tough case, but interesting. That's a good one, right? Is that a good answer? All right, cool. What else? How about questions about veterinary school? How I got into that, or what I did to get in? First, be very smart. If you can't be very smart, be very nerdy and work really hard. There's because not every vet is really, really smart. I mean, I guess there's probably but they're all pretty nerdy, I'm sure there's a bell curve of nerdiness, right? If you then you look like if you had the general population and you look at 2 standard deviations, that's the problem, right? That's it. That's actual nerdiness right there in action. Cool. Adriana.
When you were in vet school,
Yep.
how many hours a day would you study? Did you have a social life?
I had too much of a social life in veterinary school. Everybody was a little different on how they studied in veterinary school. We put a lot of hours, lots and lots of hours. But it also depended on the on the subject matter. Some of it just seemed very intuitive to me, and some of it didn't. I'm a very practical learner, so by the time when I was in my first couple of years, it was really hard. I really had to put in a lot of hours, like thinking about it. But as soon as I got into the practical stuff, I had, let's say, a surgical anatomy class. So I was learning what is the anatomy for any particular surgery, and we'd kind of go through and relearn anatomy that way. And when it was that, I was like getting every single answer right, and I was like, oh, that's how I learn. I learn by practical things and remembering it. I would be in my senior year, and they would ask a question. They'd be like, oh, how do you treat, myelophthisis or, polycythemia vera, and I'd be like, oh, and they would be like, how do you know this? You were the one that was goofing off the whole time in class. You shouldn't know this. I'm like, well, there was a dog 2 weeks ago that you said might have had it, and I remember the guy he was really sad about it. And so for me, the way I learned was if I had an emotional attachment to it, it would solidify it in my brain, because I remember that from vet school 25 years ago. So it just depends on the particular subject matter and how you learn. But finding out how you learn is probably more important than anything.
Would you say when you were in school, or any type of, any school that anyone goes to, graduate school or anything, do you think it's a good idea to get involved in like clubs and, extracurriculars in the school, or is it better to just like focus on what you're doing school-wise?
I'm always a big advocate of expanding what you're doing. Use everything that's out there. If you can get into other clubs like this one. Clubs are really, really good because you meet people from other parts of the college, and it gets your brain disconnected a little bit. And so for me, doing things like going out and exercising, or being a part of the veterinary fraternity and running a petting zoo on a Saturday, those were really important to me because it got me a break. And even if it was just 5 or 6 hours, I would take that time off, and then I'd come back fresher, and it worked really, really well for me. So, and it taught me a lot about how to interact with people as well, because all of the information you have in your brain doesn't mean anything if you can't get it out to people, if you can't talk to people, if you're not comfortable in front of people one-on-one, or even in big crowds like this. Not everybody likes to talk to a crowd like this, but I do. Can you tell? Because I'll keep talking. I could talk for a long time about whatever you want me to talk about. What else? There's one in the back.
I was actually wondering, what type of vaccines do you have to get in order to prevent from getting certain diseases, especially since now you're in contact with monkeys?
Monkeys and such, yeah. So for the monkeys specifically, I actually don't deal with them too much, so I didn't have to do anything with that. As veterinarians, the basic vaccines that everybody gets, I get, but so I keep up with my tetanus, and I do have a rabies vaccination as well, and so I get titers drawn for that every 4 years. But that's basically it. Those are the two main ones. For monkeys, I didn't have to do anything because I'm not really, and I don't do too much with them. Other people do. But yeah, it varies, and it depends on where you're going to go too. So they'll have different diseases in different parts of the world. So we're in LA, which is a weird part of the United States because, who knows what could be there. Could be anything. Get vaccinated against tacos, right? Street tacos. When I was in Iowa, tacos were like, the Taco Bell crispy thing. It was basically like just a corn chip with a Maidrite in there. And we thought that was wonderful until I came to LA, and I was like, oh my God, this is like a carne asada, like a little. I was like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever had. So a taco truck on every corner would be great for me. There's already one on the corner. So anyway, I digress. What else? Open book. Why is the sky blue? Anybody? Are you answering why is the sky blue? You can. Oh.
What do you say to clients that they come in more traditional and they grew up with parents that always kept their pets outside and never inside?
Okay.
And
This sounds like a personal hey, how do I get my parents to let my dog inside? Is the question. My parents do not want the dog inside, and I really want it in my bed.
I was just having this conversation with a group of friends that basically they were trying to tell me that that they've had a dog that lived to be like over 20 or whatever, but never had a vet visit.
Yeah.
And they
Yep.
always lived outside, never
Okay.
inside.
Yeah. Right.
I'm like,
So what do you say to that? Like, oh, you know, how do you tell that people like, yeah, you should probably get this checked out by a vet, but I had this dog that lived to be 20 and it never had anything to, yeah, everybody knows about those that could happen. What I tell people is that, I grew up in Iowa, farm country, right? There were 10,000 people in the county. There were 2,000 people in the town. Everybody knew, like, there were the barn cats and there were the house cats. And of the barn cats, everybody knew at least one barn cat that lived to be 20 years old. And was just walking around, had one ear. Its eye was like all like this. It kind of would just be like, rah, and it just lived and lived and lived. But out of how many cats was that? That was one cat out of 5,000 cats that went through that all died really, really young, right? So again, what I tell people about this is no matter what we're doing, we're rolling the dice. We have to roll the dice. By taking and getting vaccines, you're rolling the dice that they're not going to have a vaccine reaction. By not getting vaccines, you're rolling the dice that they're not going to get a disease. No matter what, you have to roll the dice. All we're trying to do is stack the dice in your favor. Yes, you could have one that would do it. That's awesome. I'm so happy for you that that happened, is what I would tell them. However, if we want this one animal to have the best chance to live to be 20, these are the ways we do it. This is the best chance it's going to have. Is it going to work every time? Of course not. But how many of those, how many are there like that? That's 1 in 10,000 cats. So you're going to go through 10,000 cats before you get to that one. And so the next 10,000 they get and don't do that with are going to die horrible young death. So that's what I would say. It's just, you're just playing the odds. You can't, yeah, that happens occasionally. George Burns smoked until he was 100 years old and then he quit and then he died. So he should probably, everybody should keep smoking. So that's not right. He was just lucky. He was just one of the people that happened to be genetically predisposed to live. I tell people you're steering an iceberg. Right? But it takes a lot to move the genetic needle. So I use that analogy of rolling the dice. Does that help?
yeah, I mean, I kind of answered it the same way. I mean,
Yeah, you got lucky. That was it. You're really, really lucky. Most of them are not like that. People will say to me, I've had dogs my whole life and I've never heard of that. Dogs don't get diabetes. I'm like, well, I saw 3 diabetic dogs last week, so I don't know. I've had dogs my whole life. Well, how many dogs is that? 10 dogs. I'm like, I saw 10 dogs this morning. My N is much different than what yours is. So you have an N of 10. I have an N of 10,000, right? So then you're into statistics, and people like, do you know that 60% of statistics are made up on the spot? It's true. That's a good joke. That's a good joke. I'm just going to use that one every single time. Being a vet is a good job. I really like it. That's a good one. People, yeah. Wait, yeah. Go.
What classes in undergrad do you think prepared you most for vet school?
Classes in undergrad that prepared me most for vet school. Does recess count? I really enjoyed my zoology classes. Because it combined a lot of anatomy and physiology together. So I'd say that really helped. Embryology was good. Man, I just am really curious. I loved kind of all my classes. So everything that I did sort of had an angle towards it. So even my English classes and thinking about how different people communicate in different ways was really important to me. And so that's something I really, really thought about. I think there was one that was particularly like the most helpful. They all helped in some way to me. And I'm just kind of one of those people, anytime I'm talking to somebody and they're telling me about their job, I'm like, I want to know more about that. Because everybody here knows something I don't know, that you all have something that you could teach me. And I'm just that kind of a person that I really want to know about that new thing. And as long as you're curious and keep learning about that new thing. So whatever class I was taking in vet school, I was like, oh my God, virology is the best thing. Oh, radiology, that's so cool too. I can't believe, oh wait, anatomy, let's go to there. I just was really into whatever I was doing. And I just thrived on that. So, but then by my last year, I was ready to go, man. I was like, put me in, coach. I am ready to play. Ready to play. It's cool. What else? Oh, yeah, go.
I have a German Shepherd Husky.
Yes.
And I did it crossbreeds with longer than pure breeds.
Do crossbreeds live longer. Well, German Shepherd Husky, you're in trouble. So I would buy, I just need to buy a vacuum, I guess I would say, like something, because you're going to buy mounds of hair every day that you're pulling off. So the question that you're getting to is one of genetics. Any genetics majors in here? Geneticists in here? So genetics, let's see if I can remember this exactly right. I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I got to remember. One of the short answer is yes. And the long answer is maybe. And again, it's, we're kind of looking at statistics. But crossbred dogs or mutts are going to have more genetic diversity. So they're less likely to have some diseases that are inbred, like the Habsburgs. Is that too soon? Anybody know? Habsburgs? Who knows what the Habsburgs are? So like one person. Okay, so it was this Austrian royalty in like the 1700s, and they just kept inbreeding, and they got to the point where they couldn't even breed anymore. It was really awful. And there's big lip like this, so Habsburg dogs. But many of the breeds we have now, because they're super inbred. So if you look at bull terriers, it was like the Spuds Mackenzie dog, an inbreeding coefficient, let's see if I can get this right. Inbreeding coefficient, first cousins are 25%, is that right? Because they have 25% of the genetic material the same. That sounds right. We'll say that's right. Anybody know what the inbreeding coefficient of the bull terrier is now? Amongst all the animals in that breed? 60% right now. So I mean, these breeds are not going to be able to keep going. We're just going to end up with Habsburg dogs, and they're just going to die out. So it's going to be a huge problem. So the short answer is yes. The long answer is, but you still could, because they're still so inbred and they're pretty close. You may end up with, still some of the same problems you could end up with, hip dysplasia or whatever. Ooh. What else? Those are good questions. I'm liking these questions.
Can I have two questions? The first one is.
Well, one question at a time, please.
How does one differentiate a good vet from a decent one or a
Oh,
bad one?
great question. Well, if their name is Mike McClenahan, they're a good vet. I'm just going to start there. That was an easy question. Little softball. Hit that one out of the park. I would say that most vets out there are really pretty good. They have the knowledge in there. Even the vets I've worked with, and I'm like, the people don't like them as much, or they still aren't making a lot of mistakes. They're getting the right answer most of the time. Far more important is that you feel comfortable with that veterinarian, that you feel comfortable asking questions when you don't understand something, because you won't, that you feel comfortable bringing that up. So when I'm talking to people and I'm talking to clients, something I do, you might have noticed this, I often will say something, does that make sense? And I wait for a response. Or I'll say at the end of it, this is what we're going to do. Do you like the plan? And I'll wait for an answer. And if they, and I'll kind of not just read what they say, but I'll look at their nonverbal cues as well. So if I say, do you understand that, right? It's a very closed-ended question, but I'm looking at their verbal, nonverbal, if there's any mismatch there. So a classic thing people will do is if you give them a whole list of things, I want you to give this oral ABID for 2 weeks, then decrease to once a day, and then it'll be written on there. Does that make sense? And they'll go, yeah, I got that. Totally got that. They're like, so there's a big mismatch. Or they'll pause, they'll go, I got it. They don't got it. So I'll back up and start over. I don't call it out. I just find another way around. So if you can find a vet who's got some of those communication skills, or if they don't, maybe you have those communication skills and you learn them and you can look at them and say, this is what I understand the plan to be. Is that correct? What do I do if this doesn't work? So having a plan and understanding what your needs are and being able to speak those works well. So when I go to my physician, I use those kinds of things. Because I do the same thing everybody does. I go to the doctor and I'm really worried about the one thing, and he goes, and I'll say, okay, so this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm going to do if it doesn't work. And he says, yep, that sounds right, and then I feel good about it. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, basically. That's
Yeah.
kind of just how you make yourself stand out as a vet. If people who are trying to attempt to go to vet school, how can they, improve on themselves in order to relate to the, patient, or in order to empathize with the patient?
Yeah, so there's patients and there's clients, right? They're a little bit different than human medicine, right? So we have patients and we have clients, and I look at both. So one of the things that I'm doing, again, coming from a farm background, if you look at farmers, when they start, the vet comes out and they look at what's the first thing they do? They just stand at the fence and they start talking. And they're just watching. They're just looking at what's going on, right? They're not doing it. They don't run up to the first cow and start pulling blood on it. They just watch. They look and see. So the phrase was, don't just do something, stand there. So when I first come in a room, I'm sizing up what's going on. How nervous is the animal? How nervous are the people? That sort of thing. And I usually introduce myself to the animal at the same time that I am to the people. I say hello to the people, and then I start to introduce to the animal and try to see what's going on there. And then with the people, I try to get a rapport going as well. I think that the thing that makes people stand out in any job you have, the thing that is going to be, it doesn't matter. You could be the worst microbiologist in the world. Like, you could have gone to Berkeley, for all I know. What? Did I say something wrong? But if you can talk to people and they feel that connection, it's going to be really, that's the thing that's going to make people like you, right? So, and they're going to care about what you have to say. So communication and learning those communication techniques is going to take you farther in life than anything else. And so it was something that I actually was pretty good at just naturally, because I'm kind of you couldn't tell, I like to talk to people. I'm naturally gregarious, like talking to people. But as I learned why I was good at it and what things I was doing specifically and then could tell other people to do, that's when I felt like I went to kind of another level of being able to talk to people. So a lot of people liked me, and I was like, why do they like me when I talk to them? What things am I doing that are helping out? And the same thing with animals. Now I can tell people in behavior for animals, why are we worried about that animal? Most vets can look at an animal like, oh, they're giving me the look. Well, that animal is about to bite you. I can tell you why, and I can tell you why it made you uncomfortable 3 minutes before. What was that about? Like, what was the specific thing that the animal's doing that made you uncomfortable? So being able to not just internalize it, but actually, externalize it and make sure that's going to take you a long ways. That's a long answer, wasn't it? Okay, cool. What else? What are we doing? Oh, we got to go.
We got like 2 more questions.
2 more questions. I was doing good watching my clock on the thing, wasn't I? Yeah? Yeah, okay.
How do you prevent burnout, I guess?
Burnout is a big problem in veterinary medicine. We have one of the highest suicide rates of any profession out there. It's been a real problem and has kind of come to the forefront this year. Personally, I don't work as many hours as I probably could. I could easily work another day and a half and fill it up. Instead, I try to keep it to 3.5. There are 3 long days and a half day. And then I try to do other things. I mean, I like doing stand-up comedy. I like going on the internet, but I also exercise, and I do lightsaber fencing. Yeah, super nerdy, but it's a lot of fun. Yeah, yes, we make the sound. Bzz, bzz, yes, we do. And yeah, it hurts when you get hit with one. Yeah. So I do those kinds of things for fun. And then also therapy has helped me a ton. Like, I go to therapy. We go to the doctor if we get sick and we have a sore throat. Why wouldn't you go if you got like a sore head and your sore emotions and your heart hurts? Of course you should go. But it was kind of a stigma against that too. So I would say getting professional help and then finding out what you can do to disconnect from it. That's how I do it. I leave every day at lunch. There's no one answer, but finding out. Done? One more? I'm still good.
From a big accident like Iowa, did you automatically know towards the end of your vet school that you wanted to go into small animal practice?
So coming from an ag state, did I know that I wanted to do small animal coming out? So the way Iowa State worked is we did 3 years. Everybody did everything together, all our medicine, rotations, everything. And then our last year we could track mixed animal, large animal, small animal. And I decided to track small animal. The more large animal stuff I did, the less I wanted to do. Yeah, it was pretty obvious to me. Like, I was not, I'd ridden horses, but I was not comfortable around horses. The one time I had to do the few things, so an emergency, we had to do rounds and we had to do all this stuff. I had to milk a horse. And I was like, all right, I'm milking this horse because the foal was in ICU and we had to keep the milk going. So I had to milk the horse every night. So I had to do that. And then I had to do one anesthesia rotation where I was in dealing with the horses. And the technician goes, looks at me and says, Holly was one of my classmates. It says, Holly, I know she's your classmate. Today, she is your boss. If she says move, move and you will not die. And I was like, I got this. Yeah, you're cool. I do not have, nobody, once I saw that, I was like, these people know what they're doing with cattle. I mean, I could learn it, sure. I mean, but I was way behind on that. And it wasn't something I decided I wanted to do at that point. At that point, I was really into behavior medicine and oncology and really enjoying that stuff. So, yeah. So yes, I did. Short answer, yes. Okay. All right, that's it. That's all we have time for? One more? Oh, wait, no, I saw, yeah.
So I work at a vet hospital. It's pretty expensive in an okay area. What would you tell somebody if they had financial restraints, but their pet was in
That's such a hard thing. We talk about this all the time because, cost is a factor. So what I always tell people, I start with, this is what I would love to do. And then I can usually tell by their face where that conversation is going, like they don't have the money for that. I give them options of what we can do here. And then if they really can't do anything with it, then, we just kind of go through our progression of things. There are other hospitals that don't do as much as we do, don't have as big an overhead. They're in a cheaper part of town, so they're cheaper and they'll, you'll get a chance to get it better. It's not as not as many people handling and hands-on as what we're doing, but it would be a chance. And then there's always, GoFundMe and Care Credit and things like that people can use to pay. And if not, then, depending on how bad the animal is, sometimes we say, you know what, if you can't afford to care for this animal, euthanasia is the best thing. So we do have that option. If an animal gets hit by a car and we're like, we maybe could fix it, but it's $2,000 just to see if we can get it through the first night, and you can't pay your rent if it's over $100, best thing for this animal might be to euthanize it at that point. And unfortunately, that's a conversation we have sometimes. So those are all the things that come up with it. It's tough. It's a hard conversation to have, but I just sit down and talk to the people very frankly about it, and what can you do? Let's talk about it. I've had people say, I've got $300, and I'll be like, all right, I'll give you a chance for this, and I give away a lot of free stuff. I mean, I do. I'm not supposed to, but we all love animals, so we're giving them the best chance we can. And some of them make it, some of them don't, but we gave it a chance. Yeah, cool. That it? Time?
If you guys have any questions, he's gonna be up here for like 3 minutes after we're done. So if you guys want.
That's it. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I can come back.